What's up, y'all? It's Pat the Flip, and today I'm reading How Do I Catch Up to the 09ers while playing some Ruiner. If you like this, please drop by patreon.com/pattheflip to check out the rest of my work, ask me some questions, and help me pay my bills. Thanks for listening. Hey Pat, I am a lifelong Smash player who recently got into fighting games during quarantine with Street Fighter V. Since then, I've switched mainly to Granblue and Strive and have started practicing and competing in those two games. One mental roadblock that I find at my in-person locals with the former is the semi-mantra I find myself repeating in my head. How can I compete with 13 years of Street Fighter IV? I'm pretty new to the genre, and although I'm doing my best to go through the motions, getting practice, playing more, taking notes, and improving on the parts I know I can improve on, there's that looming feeling that all the competition has been honing their skills since 2009. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, but as someone who wants to push themselves to be competitively the best they can, it's a little disheartening to feel frustrated that many of my opponents have a decade-long head start. Granblue's ease of play but large-scale similarity to Street Fighter seems to only further this comparison in my head. Even though I know that improvement comes at a personal level, it feels kind of crushing to be aware of this massive generational gap that comes with genre-wide experience and skill specialization. I guess my main question is, how do you reconcile with the fact that it's hard to catch up and get good at fighting games when you're starting this late? How does someone catch up to someone who started playing footsies before you even knew how to do long division? So this question cracked me up when I got it because I had to remind myself that the 09ers are the veterans now. And for me, I use that term to refer to the babies of the FGC. That said, catching up doesn't quite work this way. When Street Fighter IV dropped, I had been playing fighting games competitively for about 7 years, which by then was a little less than half of the duration of the entire existence of competitive fighting games. Seeing so many new players around had me excited to ride the wave of my experience advantage. If it took me 7 years to get to where I am now, surely it would take them 7 years to catch up, during which I'd be pushing myself to greater heights and basking in the adoration of all the 09ers in the meantime. What's more, I actually had a local advantage on Street Fighter IV because I was in Japan when the game dropped in 2008, and I'd gotten to play a bunch there before the North American release in 2009. In my recollection, I got to feel kinda good at Street Fighter IV for like a couple months before people caught up, and I was fighting for my life every time I entered a bracket. What the heck happened? While fighting game players do talk a lot about legacy skill, and make no mistake, there are certainly skills that cross over from game to game, a lot of how that stuff works still has to be learned from game to game. I thought I was nice with the footsies because I'd played ST, Third Strike, and CVS2, but footsies in each of those games is different due to the combat systems and attack design. In ST, footsies are played around the fireball game. In CVS2, they're played around guard crush, and in Third Strike, they're played around parries. So while I had the basic tools of footsies ahead of the 09ers, I still had to go and learn the Street Fighter IV specific stuff. Character matchups and attack interactions, risk-reward payoffs, how to deal with invincible backdashes, and playing around focus attack. Since I didn't actually like Street Fighter IV that much, however, I didn't really do a lot of that. That said, when you're playing Granblue against weathered veteran 09ers, they've got a head start on the basic concepts behind footsies, but they still need to learn how Granblue specific footsies work like anyone else. You don't need to catch up as much as you think you do. It's also worth mentioning that catching up invariably happens faster and faster. I learned faster in my 7 years of lead time than someone who started with Street Fighter II because I had the benefit of a local competitive community that historically had strong footsies thanks to players like John Choi and Ricky Ortiz drilling them into us every week while taking our lunch money, as well as the beginnings of online video sharing to get infrequent visibility into what high-level play looked like in Japan. But 09ers came up in an era of net play, broadband, streaming video, and tech videos that enabled people to level up much faster. The pandemic generation of fighting game players learned even faster still, because the more experienced fighting game players are finally learning how to teach the damn games they play. A year spent learning to play fighting games in 1991 is probably worth a month or even less now. That said, I think there's a bigger misconception worth correcting here, and that's the idea that you need to catch up at all. When I got into competitive martial arts, I didn't look at my instructor's years of experience and think, shit, how am I going to catch up to this guy? When I was considering becoming a full-time fighter and instructor myself, I didn't think about what I had to do to compete against the generations of people ahead of me. They weren't my competition because they were at a different point in their journey than I was. I ended up choosing a different path, but had I stuck with it, by now I'd have probably had a few low-tier pro fights before hanging up the aspirations to the title and settling down to teach. There are certainly some people out there who can dive right in with a seemingly natural proclivity and catch up to the experienced folks out there. Kamino is about as old as Third Strike and is able to hang with players who have been playing at the highest levels of fighting game play since well before he was born. Most of the time, we call these players prodigies. Most people are not like this. Personally, I consider myself the opposite of a prodigy. I'm a fighting game player who has mostly just gotten good by sticking around and playing throughout the years. But that is the thing that I'm better at than most of my generation. The vast majority of people who started around the same time as I did have moved on to living the rest of their lives. Some are still around, content to mash once a month or so with the homies, but very few of them are still competing in anything, much less playing new games. Most of the dreaded 09er vets have moved on to focus on other parts of their lives. It's been 13 years after all. Most people don't love anything enough to do it for 13 years, even if they really, really love it. And the ones that are still playing likely aren't as focused on competition like they were in their earlier years because they found that competition alone isn't enough to keep them in the game. The ones that have stuck around aren't good because they started with Street Fighter 4. It's far more likely that they stuck around because they're good. I refer to my fighting game experience as a career because that's the best word to describe my long-term engagement with the activity. The fact that you are more junior in your career than I am doesn't mean that you cannot compete with me, but it does mean that I have the benefit of a broader and deeper set of experience. Some of that experience is indeed represented in the 10 minutes or so it takes to play a tournament set, but most of it is not. The thing is that if you've done this shit for a long time, most of the stuff you've learned is not how do I press buttons good, it's how do I find ways to keep this a part of my life as I grow older and manage adult responsibilities and priorities. If you really want to catch up to me or an 09er or anyone else, it's not about the number of years you spend grinding footsies. It's about finding ways to stay active and engaged when the shine of fighting games as something new and novel has faded. Or when your dreams of being the fresh up-and-coming talent are reality checked out. Or when your friends move on to something else. Or your job becomes a career that you're mentally and emotionally invested in. Or you become a partner in a relationship or provider for a family. The cliche is true. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We all get roughly the same amount of time here on Earth to play fighting games or do whatever the heck you want to do with it. The question is how you use yours, not how far you make it relative to someone else who is further along on their path than you are. When you're a year and a half in, you shouldn't be thinking about how to catch up to someone who's 10 years deep. Use your peers as a benchmark if you must, but know that in the long haul, the only one you're competing with is yesterday's you. Stick with it long enough, and eventually you'll see how little our years of experience mean in the big picture. Thanks for listening.